Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It's a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down all sorts of ranking goodness ahead of what should be an electric Week 4 slate of action. Joining me, as always, on this fine Thursday, none other than Fantasy Life Finance Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain Friedman, allegedly internet problems. I think he was a little bit afraid to compete either way. Just us today. How's it going, man?
Yeah, I can't believe he missed an opportunity to have all three Cowboy fans together with the Cowboys playing on Thursday night. You know, come on, Friedman. You got to be better than that. We know you're scared, but we just want to hang out with you, buddy.
Also, for the record, Dwain, you and him did make a little wager last week that, not to throw you under the bus to start the show, he did happen to win. And there was supposed to be a punishment attached to that. So, hey, he didn't show up. We'll see what happens next week. But thoughts on, the 49ers not getting it done?
Yeah. Look, again, I'm taking the same bet, but we admitted last week, like, Friedman's a better than he's a better. Yeah. Doesn't that sound good? Than both of us. And he was taking the points and the Rams, but I was just looking at the Rams. I'm like, no Puka Nacua and no Cooper Kupp. I mean, come on. The 49ers can stop the one player the Rams have, and Kyren Williams, right? Wrong. No, they can't. How does that even happen, Hartitz? You know, the only way you lose the game is to let Kyren Williams beat you, and you let him beat you.
And, like, did you see the win probability chart? I want to say it was over 95% for the 49ers at one point in time. So that's just a good old-fashioned game.
That's my takeaway.
Yeah, good for Friedman. We'll see him next week. But yeah, guys, again, big show on the way. We'll break down quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, risers, fallers, and of course, Dwayne's famous sicko starts. But first, going to run through some of the bigger news items from a fairly eventful Wednesday of NFL action. So, guys, at quarterback, Ian Rappaport has reported that Jordan Love with a knee has a quote-unquote very real shot to play Week 4. He's continuing to practice on a limited basis. But yeah, the Malik Willis experience might be over ahead of this matchup against the Vikings. Also, Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert limited in practice with that ankle injury. He did say that he does not think that he is going to be resting this week and then coming back after their bye, quote unquote. I don't think that's the way we're heading. Very, very tough guy, obviously. Practicing in full and accordingly good to go. We have Sam Darnold with that knee issue and also 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy. However, Dwayne, the biggest news I would say from the entire day was a report from ESPN insider Jeremy Fowler, who noted that the Bears plan on giving Roschon Johnson, quote unquote, an extended look this Sunday against the Rams. Obviously, DeAndre Swift averaging just 1.8 yards per carry, had a couple of viral clips of his lack of vision really being put on display against the Colts. Thoughts on what Roschon could do here in Week 4, Dwayne?
Yeah, I mean, look, the door is open. We talked about this in the utilization report as one of him being one of the guys you could have potentially gotten for almost nothing off of waiver wires. Now, after the news story broke yesterday, if you're playing in some of these sicko leagues like Ian and I are in, the bids definitely went up after that report came out. But we did see it in the utilization last weekend, Ian, with Roschon taking 38% of the snaps. This was his first game to play on offense. He'd been active one other game and only played on special teams. But it is interesting, right, that it takes Travis Homer going to the IR to even get Roschon Johnson on the field to take snaps, and he suddenly leapfrogs Khalil Herbert, yet now he's supposed to be the guy that's going to take over. I don't know, like Shane Waller, and this whole experience is very, very confusing to me as to how this pecking order is working out. But like we said, it did happen last week for Roschon. He was clearly ahead of Khalil Herbert. So from that standpoint, the narrative makes sense. The question, Ian, is like, how valuable are touches or opportunities really going to be in the Bears backfield? And when we say that the player is going to get extended run, is that what that really means? Or are we probably looking more at a three-way committee? Look, I get it. If you play in a league where your draft is 20 rounds, you're going to have to take a stab on a guy like Roschon, and you can't worry about what happens. You just know that there's a chance. He could be the starter. He could be like a Zach Charbonnet, in 2 weeks from now. But again, my question is like, what's the quality of what is the quality of the offense, the offensive line? Like, how much do you think Roschon Johnson's really worth?
Not all that much, man. Look, we have 3 weeks of evidence telling us this Bears offense is hardly high scoring, and any Bears fan can tell you just how bad this offensive line has been. Obviously pass blocking, but also, man, on the ground, just 30th in yards before contact per carry this season. So, hey, I agree. Giving DeAndre Swift $24 million was a bad idea. But, when you start looking over his career with the Lions, with the Eagles, Dwayne, this is a guy who has regularly averaged north of 4.5 yards per carry. So when I see him cratering the 1.8, again, he hasn't been playing well, but I think that maybe just has a little bit more to do with that offensive line than anything. Overall on the year now, Bears running back is dead last in both yards per carry and yards after contact per carry. Roschon this week, again, nice pickup to Dwain's point, but still not someone that I think we're going to be able to squeeze, into that top 24 by any stretch. So other running back news, Texans running back Joe Mixon, week to week now with his ankle, and Dameon Pierce is set to return from his hamstring injury per Aaron Wilson. So could be more of a split committee with Akers, Dario Gumbawale, and now Dame Pierce. Commanders running back Austin Eckler ruled out with a concussion. We're going to be talking about Brian Robinson here in just a bit. Some Wednesday DMPs to keep an eye on. That, again, Dwayne and I will be back on a Friday to fully break down. But Alvin Kamara with a hip and rib injury wasn't practicing to start the week. Jerome Ford with a knee issue, and also Pierre Strong with a hamstring. So we'll break down the Browns RBs a bit more in a bit. Also, per Panthers head coach Dave Canales, Jonathan Brooks with his knee injury is in the final stages of return to play. I like to think, Dwayne, that, Jonathan Brooks got a look at that Andy Dalton experience last week and said, you know what, all of a sudden I am feeling quite a bit better out here. So will be a lot of fun to again get the 2024 NFL drafts RB1 out there, hopefully sooner rather than later. At wide receiver, some Wednesday did not practices. Debo Samuel, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Tank Dell, all dealing with various issues. And Tank Dell's, just overall situation, he's considered day-to-day with a rib and wrist injury. So it doesn't seem overly severe at the moment. Some limited in practices. Keenan Allen's back from the heel, which is good news. Jamar Chase dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury, but still out there. And also Marvin Harrison Jr. Just the quad, still a smash spot, but again, something to keep an eye on. Dwayne Cooper Kupp is no longer in a cast. That is good news. But perhaps the most kind of just changing impact is the potential and likely return now of Jordan Addison. Obviously missed these last 2 weeks. And Dwayne, coming into this year, Addison wasn't someone I went out of my way of drafting because I just wasn't all that confident in the upside of the Vikings passing game, particularly with anyone beyond Justin Jefferson. But hey, man, with the way Sam Darnold's playing, all of a sudden Jordan Addison, is he someone you think we can be trusting as an upside wide receiver 3?
Yeah, we just need to see him healthy. He's had the 2 different injuries now. He had the one to end preseason, and now he's picked this one up. But he's a good player. Like when you go turn on the film, Ian, and you watch him, he's a guy that can gain separation. Yeah, he's a little bit of a slider build, but he knows how to set up bigger defenders than him. He's also a guy that can get loose behind the secondary, and we've seen Sam Darnold already willing to target him deep, just like what we saw last year from Nick Mullins. So he has that big playability. He has that ability to get open. So I think he's clearly the number 2 on the team behind Justin Jefferson, with TJ Hawkinson still on the pup. And to your point, now with this potential for a 300-yard passing game, total every week I think that's in play. With the Vikings and Sam Darnold, we just haven't had to see them necessarily push it. They've been passing and hitting the touchdowns, and they've been very efficient, but they also haven't had to kind of keep the speedometer pegged, right now on offense. So I do think there's some upside here with Jordan Addison once he's completely healthy. Like he could make his way in all the way into that wide receiver 2 conversation. Right now for this weekend, I would say borderline wide receiver 3. Like I want to see him healthy for a game, but there's definitely spots, depending on your lineup, where he would be a guy that you're getting in there. Pretty good matchup, 9th overall, 247 yards allowed per game by the Packers so far. So this is a defense that you can get behind, and it's that divisional matchup, so that's always fun.
Yeah. The Jefferson and Darnold production so far coming on overall, relatively low volume has really been surprising to me, Dwayne, because the Vikings just 25th in actual pass play rate this season. But one of my favorite parts of your utilization tool suite is the drop back rate over expected. And in that, they're actually plus 4% on the season. So again, it's been more of these blowouts, going on where, they haven't had to keep their foot on the gas during the second half. But God forbid we ever do get a competitive 4-quarter game. I do think that we're going to see Darnold start getting pass attempts in the more mid-30s, and accordingly, lots more targets for his big 2 wide receivers. Over at tight end, guys, Trey McBride starting off the week with a DNP and a concussion, so I would be looking heavily into the waiver wire streets to try to find a replacement for him. Evan Ingram also still not practicing with a hamstring, nor is David Njoku with the ankle. Good news, though, Dwayne, is George Kittle returned to a limited practice after missing last week's game with a hamstring injury. And then finally, just keep an eye on, guys, Eagles right tackle Lane Johnson, also in the concussion protocol, not practicing. The offensive line still look good post Jason Kelsey, but then you take away Lane as well. Maybe, just maybe, those rushing lanes aren't going to be quite as wide for Saquon, especially with all these wide receiver injuries as well. And then finally in New Orleans, really dealing with a lot of injuries there, and their just overall offensive line is banged up. Not good when Derek Carr historically has been one of the more, pressure, just ridden. He's been really bad under pressure over the years, so not going to be ideal if his offensive line is not at 100%. So that is the news. everybody. Now we're getting some quarterbacks, risers, follows, in a sicko start. But first, a quick word to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. Fantasy football season is here, and while that may be cause for celebration, there will also be some hard days ahead. But Mike's Hard Lemonade wants to remind you that hard days deserve a hard lemonade. So after a hard day spent scouring the waiver wire, concocting the perfect trade, or tinkering endlessly with your starting lineup, it's time to quench your hard-earned thirst with a Mike's Hard Lemonade. Dwain, I'm enjoying my coffee, man, but if I had a Mike's Hard Lemonade, I would not be mad about that. All I'm saying, especially, if you're at an airport, you can drink whenever. It's one of the cool things about that place. But anyway, back to, relevant fantasy football talk, and that is the quarterback position of one man, Dwain, who, let's face it, a lot of us have been riding or dying for. It is Kyler Murray, and now set up awfully well against the Commanders defense that, if we've learned anything through 3 weeks, Dwain, it's that, we want to start our fantasy football players against Washington whenever possible.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the obvious ones, but anytime we have a guy like Kyler Murray, that consensus across all of our rankers, Ian, we have him QB1 this week. So I thought he was definitely still worth mentioning here. We're not going to go on and on about Marvin Harrison Jr., but just know everything, whenever we get to the wide receiver segment, that we've said about Kyler Murray also applies to Marvin Harrison Jr., who we have as our wide receiver 4 overall this weekend. So we like both of these. But with Kyler, it's pretty straightforward. He's already averaging 20.2 fantasy points per game, Ian. Now he gets to play the worst defense against opposing quarterbacks. The Commanders give up 24.4 points per contest. And over in the FantasyLife DVP, so that's defense versus position tool, we've got this cool new thing that talks about the boost that a player gets. And right now, the Commanders are worth a 43-yard boost per game to opposing quarterbacks in the passing department. So you look at the FantasyLife projections right now, Kyler Murray averaging 212 passing yards per game. Where do we have him projected? Right at 250. Funny how that kind of works out. It's pretty much the boost that we just talked about going to Kyler Murray. So we've got a higher ceiling this week in the passing department for Murray, who we have seen really developing that connection with Marvin Harrison Jr. Ian, I think we get at least one big play out of that duo, maybe a couple of big touchdown plays. So yeah, Kyler is a guy that, man, the sky's absolutely the limit. And just to kind of put a bow on this Washington secondary and kind of take it one level deeper, man, here are the coverage grades for their corners over at Pro Football Focus. So Benjamin St-Juste, 60.1. That ranks 67th out of 102 qualifying quarterbacks. Mike Sanristil, 49.7 coverage grade. That ranks 92nd out of 102 qualifying cornerbacks. And then Ian, I don't know if I can even say this name. I should have looked it up beforehand. Noah Igbenogany.
Tough one.
I'm Ron Burgundy, 46.8 coverage grade, 96 of 102 out of the cornerbacks that were available. So not ideal whenever you don't have a cornerback ranked even inside the top 65 across your 3. So it's going to be matchups galore. Wherever Marv lines up, Marv's going to have a mismatch, and we're going to be able to trust Mr. Kyler Murray to find him. So yeah, QB1 overall across all of our rankers, which is we don't see that all the time, because that's a bold. It's bold. It's a great matchup, but it's bold to push him that high, and everyone did it across our rankers.
Pass rush also ranks just 22nd in pressure rate. So yeah, that bad combination of not being able to overly guard or, impact the quarterback. It's no wonder Vegas has, the Cardinals offense implied for a week high 27 points. So would be nice to get, again, another familiar boom, Dwain, because obviously we saw that ceiling from Kyler in week 2, but just overall on the season right now, he's averaging 19.2 fantasy points per game. Very good. That's an improvement over what he did last year or even in 2022. But remember, guys, back in 2020, saw Kyler going for 23.7. That is, again, the ceiling that we could be working with here sooner rather than later. Final point here, Dwain, because again, Trey McBride is out with a concussion. Not out confirmed, but not practicing on Wednesday. It's not a good sign for being cleared by the weekend. Obviously, we're all starting Marvin Harrison Jr., but hey, as we saw last week in that 49ers game, just because we do have a condensed passing game doesn't always mean the guy that we expect to ball out is ultimately the one that does. So among Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Tip Raymond, is there another player on the Cardinals you think could really benefit from this matchup?
If I had to pick, it would be Greg Dortch, because I think he's the one guy, Ian, that is an actual, he earns targets. And that's what I consider to be the leading indicator for talent. And that's the thing we're depending on most for wide receivers once they get on the field is, can they get open? Are they on the same page with their quarterback? Can they do something with the ball? Last week, Dortch was going into that game with an injury. He's off the injury report this weekend. Michael Wilson's a guy they like down around the red zone, so I'm not going to completely rule him out being able to score a touchdown, but he's not a target earner. returner, Ian. Like, this is a guy that's like 15% targets per route run. That's really like a wide receiver 5. So I don't really want to be messing around with Michael Wilson. If you had to, you're in a really gross league. I get it. This game has an opportunity to shoot out, to your point. We've got Jaden Daniels on the other side. The Cardinals don't really have a very good defense either. So you could do worse than Michael Wilson if you're playing in a deep league, but my pick would be Greg Dortch if I had to choose.
Obviously, James Conner locked in the starting lineups as well. He's a top 10 RB per Dwain and myself over on FantasyLife.com in our consensus ranks. All right, Dwain, another riser is another dual threat quarterback. Steelers QB1 Justin Fields going up against the Colts defense that has allowed the second most total yards in the NFL this season. So I get it. It's not like Fields and the Steelers offense has exactly lit the world on fire so far. But again, Dwain, we do have a larger sample size of Fields being a pretty good fantasy quarterback, and some of the strides he's made as a passer, at least through 3 weeks, have also been encouraging.
Yeah, and we also have a larger sample on just players that are a very similar archetype, right, to Justin Fields over the history of the last 10 years and how they've been able to fare. And a lot of that does tie back to, we talk about this all the time, like, he's got legs and he knows how to use them. This is like a ZZ Top song. I don't know how well you know ZZ Top, but that's a good one to go back and check out.
He's a sharp
dresser. Yeah, he's only average. Yeah, there you go. He had 11.9 and 11.4 points in the first 2 games. But last week he came through with 19.4. And I think that's really like the kind of number we should be expecting from him, because if we go back and we look at players similar to his archetype, he's got 19% of the team's design rushing attempts. Okay, that ranks 5th in the NFL right now for quarterbacks. And he's got a 10% scramble rate. That is one of the top 5 as well in the NFL. So he's averaging 8.3 rushing attempts per game when you put all of that together. If we go back and we look since 2011 and we look at quarterbacks that are not throwing the ball very well. Now, to your point, he is throwing the ball better, but we've not seen the production in the passing game yet. Only 172 yards per game. So I went back and looked. All right, let's just find guys throwing the ball under 200 yards per game, Ian, but averaging 8 or more rushing attempts. They averaged 18.9 fantasy points. So these guys were not good passers. In fact, they were terrible. So even if Justin Fields doesn't, eventually just break through in the passing game. And guys, he's going to have spike games. Like, it's just going to happen. He's eventually going to have a game where he throws for 250, 300 yards just because of the randomness of the way these things work. But let's just assume he's still going to be a 200-yard passer. We should be thinking about him as being a guy that can score between 18 and 20 fantasy points on a weekly basis. And because of those first 2 games, people have doubts about it. So, yeah, he gets an upgrade this weekend because we're also facing off against the freaking Indianapolis Colts. They have been one of the worst run defenses in the league, Ian, giving up 179 yards per game. No, those aren't passing yards, folks. Those are rushing yards that they're giving up per game against some teams that they knew were going to run the ball. They knew the Packers were going to run the ball every play they could when they had Malik Willis, and the Colts somehow still turned around and let that team go off for like 240 or whatever ridiculous number that was. So this is a team that even when they know what's coming, they're not getting things cleaned up, and they're having problems stopping the run. And kind of as a slight joke this morning, in the rankings, I actually put, Justin Fields upgrades to low-end running back 1 territory this week, because we also could have a situation where Najee Harris, a little banged up. I know Mike Tomlin, he's going to rub some dirt on it. He's going to play. But Jaylen Warren missed practice on Wednesday. He got pulled from the game last weekend. Cordarrelle Patterson's going to come in and do his thing as well, but there could be a few more carries on the table this weekend in a situation where one of those guys could be out. So, yeah, for me, Justin Fields upgrades to low-end QB1 territory this weekend. I would start him over Anthony Richardson. How about you?
I am with you, Dwain. He is my QB9 on the QB11 on the week. Excuse me. He is your QB12. So we're up there, man. We are up there. Nice. And again, this Colts team, as bad as they are against the run, not great against the pass either. 5th worst pressure rate on the season. So banged up. No DeForest Buckner. Again, he is on IR. But again, more reasons to, trust the opposition facing off against Indy. So right now, only Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts have a higher completion percentage over expected. To Dwayne's point, not exactly leading to a ton of passing yards through the air. But also, look at the wide receivers he's throwing to. Other than George Pickens, not like we're exactly cooking with gas, over there in the Pittsburgh Arthur Smith-led experience. So with Fields, also final thing on his rushing, he's still averaging, close to 9 or 10 rush attempts per game. It's just his yards per carry has gone from 6.2 to 3.2. And watching him, guys, he still looks like the same athletic beast out there. I really do think it's a smaller sample size than anything. So not giving away our Friday bowl predictions just yet, but I do have a feeling Fields will be present in one of those. Now, Dwain, can't stay positive all the time here. We got to break down a faller, someone that we did pay a little bit of mind to in yesterday's show as well. But yeah, man, Patrick Mahomes against the Chargers, not exactly someone that needs to be forced in the fantasy lineups these days. And, got a question in the chat yesterday. I apologize for not getting to in real time, but the question was basically Sam Darnold versus Patrick Mahomes. And we both have them ranked right next to each other, Dwain. And I can't believe I'm saying this and doing this, but I think I lean Sam Darnold.
Oh, man. Yeah. But I don't blame you. I do think they're in the same tier this weekend. So anytime we get players that are in the same tier, I mean, we group guys together based on all of these different factors, right, that go into how well they're playing, how they've looked, the matchup that they're dealing with, what does this game environment look like? And all of those things right now, Ian, look towards, to me, like a game where the Chiefs aren't going to need to keep, the foot on the gas. We're playing against a Chargers team that is super banged up. We'll get into that more here with one of the other players we're going to talk about a little bit later here. But when we look at Patrick Mahomes, they're 9-point favorites right now over the Chargers. And I think you could argue that maybe they should be even larger favorites when you look at all the injuries that are going on. It's not just on the offensive side of the ball for the Chargers, so I don't think they're going to be able to challenge the Chiefs as much. It's also on the defensive side. Right now, we've got a hip injury for Joey Bosa. He did not practice yesterday. Derwin James is going to miss this game due to the 1-game suspension because of the bodily harm that he's apparently putting opposing offensive players in every single week. I don't know how much of that's cheating or, against the rules kind of stuff versus that's just Derwin James being an absolute beast, and you don't want to meet him on the field if you are a wide receiver or a running back. That's just that's not something that you want to be seeing coming down the barrel at you, Derwin James. So with the Chargers not having those two key players on defense, it's just like, okay, like I could see the Chiefs doing something early in the game, like maybe Mahomes hits a couple big plays, but what are they even going to have to do in the second half? Like, I think they're going to be fine leaning into the run game. They are a team that has, they're still drop back rate over expectation, like as one of the higher ones in the league, but it's not like what we've seen in previous years. They've shown more of a willingness to just sit around and run the ball a little bit and, just try to milk away a victory. I do think long-term for Patrick Mahomes, I don't want to give up on him for the season. It's more of a this week. He is downgrading for the season. He gets a bigger downgrade this week, but honestly, more of it is because you have Kyler Murray getting the matchup that we love. You've got better matchups for Joe Burrow. You've got better matchup for CJ Stroud. You've got a lot of other quarterbacks. They're getting better matchups than him this week in better game environments. That's pushing them up, and that's part of also what's pushing Patrick Mahomes down. But I would start Kyler Murray, Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow. I would start all of those quarterbacks over him, and I agree with you. I think Sam Darnold is a real coin flip this weekend with Patrick Mahomes. The one thing I'll say is long-term, it comes down to Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce. Like, if they turn the light on, Patrick Mahomes is going to be fine. If all they have is Rashee Rice, this is probably what we're getting for the rest of the season with Patrick Mahomes.
My QB9, Dwain's QB8, so it really is just a difference in opinion on Darnold versus Mahomes. So you guys want to start Mahomes over Sam Darnold, I am not going to hunt you down and say otherwise. But yeah, certainly not projecting to be the biggest smash spot here for Patty Ice. All right, Dwain, that's sicko start of the week, and you've been running pretty hot on these so far, so no pressure. But yeah, man, Kings stay Kings. Good stuff through 3 weeks of action. Caleb Williams going up against the Los Angeles Rams. You are drinking the week 3 Kool-Aid that we saw from Shane Waldron and company.
What's interesting is I'm really not drinking the Kool-Aid, and that's why that's because at first I was like, I can't even call this a sicko because of what he did last week, but I am calling it a sicko start because you've seen Shane Waldron. You've seen like what this offense has looked like overall over the first 3 games, especially if you're watching it. It's not ideal, Ian. I mean, we've got Caleb Williams scrambling around for his life. He's honestly seeing ghosts. Some of those plays he doesn't need to be scrambling out of the pocket. There's not a lot of rhythm to this offense. There's not a lot of, okay, I feel like you guys are going to stay on schedule and not be in situations where you could just be getting completely blitzed like on 2nd and 3rd down pretty much all the time. That's the situation that the Bears are putting themselves in. So they've got to get out of that. Having said all that, he gets the Rams, man. The Rams have been an absolute, just like gold mine for opposing wide receivers and quarterbacks. We saw Jawan Jennings look like freaking Jerry Rice last weekend against this unit. So 259 yards per game, is what the Rams are giving up. That's the 5th most in the NFL. Brock Purdy got him for 292 last weekend without George Kittle or Deebo Samuel. So when you put those things together, and the Rams don't have a really good pressure rate, and that's one of the things that has given Caleb Williams as well as Shane Waldron, who can't figure out his protections, that's given them problems so far. So I don't know how much pressure really the Rams are going to be able to put on Caleb Williams. So given all those things, I do think he's a guy that could boom this weekend. Like I think he offers like 25-point upside, in the fantasy box score. You just have to acknowledge there's also downside here. Like it could still be 12 to 15 points because the Bears offenses look that bad. But if you're in need of someone that can give you some upside, maybe some of your other, options are guys like Aaron Rodgers that have a tougher matchup against the Denver Broncos, and you're just looking for that ceiling, I think Caleb is the guy that you can turn to as a sicko start.
At this point, the big thing I'd like to see is just let's quit taking so many sacks, man. I know a lot of that is on the offensive line, but man, we're talking about 2, 7, and then most recently 4 sacks. And honestly, Dwain, I know people got tired of hearing about it in the offseason cycle, but that pressure to sack rate for Caleb really hasn't gotten any better at the professional level. Right now, it is Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Skylar Thompson, and Baker Mayfield. Only 4 quarterbacks have a pressure to sack rate north of 30%. All that means is that, for all quarterbacks out there, when they do get pressured, Caleb is taking more sacks than your typical quarterback. So again, it's early. He made some nice strides, not out on him long-term by any stretch of the imagination, but yes, can't exactly give him the full benefit of the doubt right now, even though we do love starting quarterbacks against a Rams defense that has allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game in the position this season. So guys, plenty of running back goodness on the way, but first, a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. That's $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, and new customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Dwain, I don't like to make a habit of, victory lapping too hard. People hear it, and if we're right, we're right. If we're wrong, we're wrong. So it is what it is. But we did come on here last week and say Zach Moss is someone that managers should consider buying low on. Lo and behold, he posted an RB9 finish with an elite 77% snap rate. Now set up pretty well against the Carolina Panthers defense that we've really seen be one of the league's worst units in at least 2 of their 3 games. So certainly a riser right now, Dwain, the former Colts running back who looks a lot like the featured running back for Bengals offense that has been, scoring a lot of points here over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, and some of these players, we don't want to talk about them necessarily every week, but we're just following the data. And one of the things I like to look at is where does the industry have these players ranked? And guys that I've got well above that, or maybe you or some of the other rankers have above, those are the guys I really try to dig into. And so when you look at Zach Moss, he continues to get ranked too lowly by other rankers after he has shown over the first 3 games, Ian, that he is the clear-cut #1 for this team. I get it. Our preseason, thought process was probably a 1A, 1B scenario, and that's what the Bengals coaches told us all offseason. Well, guess what, guys? They lied, or something happened where they don't trust Chase Brown. Now, Chase Brown, we're not saying he's completely dust. Like, we're not saying that he won't eventually be something this season. He's shown some flashes, but right now, this is completely Zach Moss's backfield. These snap shares over the first 3 games, Ian, 65%, 82%, and 77%. Those are really elite numbers, and he's not coming off the field on the critical situations where we know there's high leverage as far as scoring fantasy points, and that's carries inside the 5-yard line. He's got 80% of those for an offense that we think is ascending, and he's on the field in the 2-minute offense, and that's the most likely time to get targeted on a team, especially when you've got guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins that are going to get the majority of the targets. But what does the 2-minute offense mean? It means defenses are now just trying to go into a shell coverage and try to stop you from getting plays. Hell, maybe we should just run 2-minute offense every play with the way defenses are playing. But Zach Moss, he's getting those targets underneath because the coverage is dictating that. And so when you get those 2-minute snaps, those are worth so much more than some of the other snaps that running backs can get. And he's got 87% of those. So carries inside the 5, getting the 2-minute offense, all the snaps are there. His utilization score is now at a 7.7. That is already high-end running back 2 territory based on the last 4 years of comps that I went back and looked at for Moss and where he's at. And last weekend, like you mentioned, he came through for us. He gave us almost 21 fantasy points. in a good matchup against the Commanders. Now he gets that other matchup you already mentioned against the Panthers. They're giving up 151 yards per game on the ground. And look, when we look at the Vegas odds makers, they also agree that the Bengals are they don't think that the Panthers are suddenly going to be this great team. Right now, the Bengals have the number 2 team total on the slate at 26.8 fantasy points. That could mean multiple touchdown opportunities for Moss. So yeah, he upgrades to top 25 flex range for me this week. And he's a running back that looks like he's potentially a low-end running back 1, and he could give you that high-end running back 1 upside.
Dwain's RB14 ahead of guys like Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne, Devin Singletary, amongst others. I had him a little lower, RB18 in my initial ranks, but you know what, Dwain? I'm sold. You're making a lot of sense today. Good job by you. I will be getting him updated here shortly after the show. But yeah, final point. Chase Brown looked a little bit better last week. Is averaging more than respectful 7.4 yards per carry on the season, but they do just trust Moss more as an every down back. And that was one of the things we talked about throughout the offseason, Dwain, the fact that Chase Brown had such a limited sample of being used as a pass protector. And through 3 weeks of this season, Zach Moss, 21 snaps as a pass block and running back. Chase Brown, just 2. So again, still got some explosive plays potentially on the table for Chase, but Zach Moss really the running back, y'all, in Cincy for the time being. Another riser, Dwain, injury-induced, but also just playing some good football. Brian Robinson, Commanders RB1, going up against the Cardinals defense. That has been okay, but certainly not anything to overly worry about. So Austin Eckler has already been ruled out with that concussion. And Dwain, we should see some Jeremy McNichols out there. Had a sweet pass protection, pickup where he flipped a, Bengals defender on that, kind of game-sealing touchdown to Terry McLaurin last week. So with all due respect to Jeremy McNichols, man, are expecting Brian Robinson to probably, breeze past that 20 combined carries and target mark, which, hey, inside an offense that hasn't punted since week 1, we're feeling pretty good about starting that man in fantasy football land.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've got the Cardinals giving up 18.4 fantasy points in a PPR scoring format to opposing running back. So that's a little bit above the league average. It's definitely not a tough matchup. They're giving up 124 yards per game. We've got a really high team total here. The Cardinals are dogs, Ian, but not by a huge number. Right now it's setting at minus. They're 4-point dogs right now, the Cardinals are. So that's still a pretty close game, considering, that when you look at some of these other contests that we have on the slate where it's -9, -10, the way our projections model work, it's not as good as like being 3 points. But once you get past 3 points, everything's on a scale with the way that it actually handles divvying up how often we think you're going to throw the ball versus how often we think you're actually going to run the ball. And right now, Brian Robinson's sitting in a really good spot. I do think, to your point, McNichols still is a little bit of the passing down work, but I think that this opens up a few more carries for Robinson, a few more pass routes. He's a guy that was already averaging 13.6 fantasy points per game. We've got him projected for 12.1 right now, and that's before me going in and taking out Austin Eckler. I've got to do that this morning after the show. So my guess is he's probably going to move up to like 14 projected points, somewhere right in that range, which is going to move him. Man, that's going to move him up quite a bit. That's going to put him up towards like the James Cook level. He's going to probably, he'll probably, let's see. He could probably
have him RB11 right now, Dwain. I mean,
okay.
Devin
I was going to say Josh Jacobs, like is the range. Yeah, David Montgomery, I think he passes. Josh Jacobs probably passes him. Right in that. Yeah, right there. Right there is probably where he's going to land. So yeah, a borderline running back 1.
Brian Robinson versus Devin Achane. Give it to me.
Oh my God, Jesus!
It's Robinson. It's Robinson.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is this weekend. Like the Dolphins just look like crap. I mean, look, and they don't have a quarterback, but we also have a situation where we've got the best game, the best, good grief, Dwain, the best potential game environment of the weekend and a potential shootout here between these other two teams. So yeah, you're probably right. I probably will get him ahead of, I hate to say it, I'm sorry, Achane, but probably ahead of Achane.
I mean, if we don't even have, we're literally just resting on volume with Achane. We don't have that efficiency boost right now. Mostert could be back as well. What a time to be alive. Brian Robinson, top 11 running back, probably going to be right there next to James Conner because, again, this is the exact matchup we want. As Dwain mentioned, 50.5-point game total. No other matchup is even higher than 47 at this point. So Brian Robinson, also someone who I know he kind of has this reputation as just an early down grinder, but he can catch the football. 36 receptions for 368 yards and 4 touchdowns last season. No, he's not Austin Eckler, but again, if they do ask him to catch some checkdowns, I don't think that's certainly, out of his skill set. So Brian Robinson, get him in those starting lineups, feeling good this week. Someone we're not feeling quite as good about though, Dwain, J.K. Dobbins, against a Chiefs defense that, yes, sometimes we will see with the advanced metrics, they aren't all that great against the run, but I think Sunday night was a good example when they said, hey, we're facing Bijan Robinson. It is time to devote more resources against the run. It's easier for teams to be able to do that than vice versa, where they suck against the pass and need to try to fix that in a tough matchup. So talk about J.K. Dobbins, Dwain, and just, hey, how the utilization is moving in a good direction, but only so much you can expect in a tough matchup when, half of your freaking offense is banged up.
Yeah, and look, I think the Chiefs are actually a pretty good run defense. The person that really got him was Lamar Jackson. They held Derrick Henry in check. And, Derrick Henry ended up scoring that 1 touchdown, but he was not a great player in week 1. So I think the Chiefs, they know their scheme. They've got the right players to handle the run. And I think they've, made a major commitment to trying to be better against that, because that was part of their issue late last season, was not being able to stop the run game of opponents. So, yeah, with Dobbins, look, he was a buy low recommendation in the utilization report this week, and that still stands. The challenge is we've got a very banged up team here for the Chargers. We've got Joe Alt not practicing yesterday with an MCL. He's listed as questionable. I would say I'm leaning more towards doubtful on that one, Ian. We already heard that he might miss a couple of weeks. So it's funny how these things happen with these coaches. Like for the first week, they play this game. He's questionable, might play. And then as soon as that game happens, they suddenly go to week status. And we don't even know when they're going to be back. So it's like the coaches are like, I'm going to keep this edge for the week. And then they get so tired of answering the questions. They're like, screw it. He's week to week. I don't want to talk to you guys anymore. Rashawn Slater, the other starting tackle on the right side, he's got a pectoral issue. So he also did not practice yesterday. Then we've got Justin Herbert, who's an absolute warrior, man. He got in a limited practice yesterday, but you guys saw him last week with the high ankle sprain. If he starts this game, there's no guarantee he finishes it. And even if he does, how good is he going to be? Can he even push off? Can he even plant? Do any of the things that you need to do? Be mobile as a quarterback, move the pocket. All those things are probably out of the playbook for Justin Herbert. Obviously, they're going to give him an injection right before the game, but how long can that last? Can that get him through halftime? I don't know, Ian. A lot of questions here for the Chargers. The other problem is on the defensive side of the ball. We already mentioned it. They potentially are going to be missing 2 key players, at least one in Derwin James. And so if they can't slow the Chiefs down in the first half, they're 9-point dogs. There's a chance that they're down by 14 at halftime. How often are you going to be able to really run the ball? So very encouraged what we saw from Dobbins last week from a utilization perspective. Took the clear lead over Gus Edwards, who's not been that great this year, folks. So I think there's a chance he holds on to that. Unfortunately, this is the way the fantasy football gods treat us. You think you really have something, and then all of these other things come into play, and we have to react. And because of that, I've downgraded J.K. Dobbins to really running back 3 territory. He's only a borderline running back 2. If there's ways to get him out of your lineup, I'm leaning towards getting him out of lineups.
Ranked between RB20 and RB23 by our Timo consensus rankers. Certainly not someone who needs to be in lineups of most shapes and sizes out there. Dwain, time for the sicko start. And again, we are recording this on Thursday morning, so we'll see how the injuries completely play out, because Jerome Ford did miss practice on Wednesday with the knee issue, but Pierre Strong Jr. is still out of the picture with a hamstring as well. And, Deontay Foreman, maybe it's an even number week thing, but Lord knows in weeks 1 and 3 was not involved in the offense at all. So assuming, Dwain, that Jerome Ford's knee thing is more maintenance than something that we actively have to worry about ahead of Sunday, talk about the spot he's in and why he is your sicko start of the week.
Yeah, when I wrote Ford up yesterday, we didn't have, the practice information yet. So he was one of the earlier names that I wrote up in the day. So we'll keep an eye on this. I may have to replace it, Ian, with a different sicko start. But if the man is active and we get some full practices here towards the end of the week, to your point, I hope it's not an even and an odd week thing with him, with Deontay Foreman. I'm kind of looking at it. I'm saying, okay, we've got 3 games now, and he's reached 70% plus snap share in 2 of them. Okay, so I'm going to take that as they actually do think this guy is the lead ball carrier, which can be a little bit risky. That's kind of what makes it a sicko situation. But his utilization score now for the season, Ian, sits at a 7.2, which would make him a running back 2 candidate based on the last 4 years of data. You get the nice matchup against the Raiders, who've conceded the 4th most yards per game on the ground at 153 yards per game. So, yeah, that means that Ford upgrades into that low-end running back 2 range. And he's also a guy that's in my top 50 flex plays for the weekend. Again, we'll be adjusting it if the injury gods play a cruel joke on us here and he doesn't practice again today.
Again, keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on it for you guys. As always, on the Friday edition of the show, we go through all the injuries and try to give our final takes on who is going to play and who is not. But yeah, maybe, just maybe. I mean, Dwain, this is probably set up to be the worst game of the season, which is still better than anything else on television. Don't get me wrong. But, Browns versus Raiders, man, talk about a loser leaves town match going on right now. Please, Cleveland, show me something on offense. Lord knows it has been a rough couple weeks there for Dog Pound Nation. All right, let's talk about some wide receivers. Now, Dwain, we got a couple more risers of faller and a sicko start. Starting off with Bills wide receiver 1, even if it's not exactly the same sort of volume we're used to seeing for number 1 pass game options. Khalil Shakir going up against a Ravens defense that I don't think is terrible by any stretch of the imagination. But, Dwain, whereas we talked about the Chiefs being great against the pass and being able to just add more resources against the run, look, the best defenses, overall defenses in the NFL, are really good against the pass, all right? The more worse average defenses, maybe they are good against the run, but we see them struggling against the pass. It is 2024 after all. And again, one such pass funnel defense is the Ravens. They are actually 5th in fantasy points per game allowed to running backs, 29th, and 31st, though, against quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. So, again, Dwain, might look like a tougher matchup on paper given the reputation of the Ravens, but Khalil Shakir, someone we shouldn't be overly worried about regardless.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a tough matchup if you think of the past Ravens units, but they're giving up the most passing yards per game in the NFL right now. They're giving up 315 yards per game in a year where teams can't even average 215. Like, they are getting absolutely smoked. Now, they've played some good quarterbacks. They've played against Dak Prescott. They've played against Patrick Mahomes. So, you have to factor those sort of things in when you think about the Ravens, but we're talking about Josh Allen. So if those guys can do it, Josh Allen can definitely do it. And you mentioned with Khalil Shakir, he's not getting the route participation that we would really want from, like a high-end wide receiver. Like, he's in that 73% range right now for the season. When we think about a wide receiver 1 in fantasy land, we're thinking about someone that's out there 90% plus of the time on pass plays. Wide receiver 2s are more in like that 84% range. Then you get down to the guys that are really wide receiver 3 candidates that are in, that 80 to 75% range. That's where Khalil Shakir sits. But I'm wondering, Ian, like, in the right kind of game script, do we just get to see Shakir more, or is it just truly a matchup thing that they're seeing, that they're saying, okay, this is the kind of defenders we're facing this week, and we think these are the players we want to put on the field that are going to give us the best chance to create mismatches? The one thing that keeps me really positive on Shakir there is, like, when I go and I watch the Buffalo Bills, like, he clearly looks like the best player on offense to me besides James Cook and obviously Josh Allen. Yes, folks, that does include Dalton Kincaid. Khalil Shakir looks better than him right now. I'm not saying that's going to last for the entire season, but Shakir is just a very fluid player. He can beat man coverage. He knows how to settle down in the zones. Josh Allen trusts him. He leads the team right now with a 23% targets per route run. He also leads the team in target share at 21%. The major thing holding him back is that route rate. If we get a route rate in the 85-90% range, if the Baltimore Ravens offense can do its part and we end up with a shootout here in this contest, and Khalil Shakir is at 85 to 90%, he's going to give you a shot for a wide receiver 1 finish this weekend in this particular matchup. I've upgraded him to a top 50 flex play for the weekend. Ian, he's my wide receiver 29. So there are definitely some questions here, but I'm also leaning into the fact that the Bills right now, they rank 28th in drop back rate at 30. They rank 28th, in drop back rate for the season. But when you look at their drop back rate over expectation, they're ranked 19th. A lot of this has had to do with the trailing game scripts. They've led by 8 or more points on 28% of their snaps. So a lot of this has just come down to they have huge leads in the second half. So you guys saw it with Miami. You saw it again last week with the Jaguars. So they're really more of a pass neutral team, but it looks like they're this run heavy team because of the way the game scripts have played out. So I expect them to need to throw the ball more this weekend. And I think that is obviously, you pointed it out. The Ravens are also good against the run. So if you're putting together a game plan, and, we can't say for sure what they're going to do, but I would assume that it is going to be through the air.
Well, I think you could also make a similar assumption with the Jaguars last week. They have a lot of talent on their defensive line specifically, not so much in their secondary. They play a ton of man covers, number one corners out. And accordingly, Dwain, plus 5% drop back rate over expected for the Bills. That was their second highest mark since Joe Brady took over in week 11 or week 10 or whatever it was last season. So again, matchups looking good. Our overall volume is on the up and up. And Khalil Shakir, a fantastic talent right now, which I know feels weird to kind of say. I get it. But guys, watch him with the football in his hands. He is, I agree with you, Dwain, the best pass game option on the Bills right now. Would make sense if, again, he continues to kind of just widen that gap, I think, between him and all the other wide receivers. So would be a lot cooler if the number one pass catcher in Buffalo was averaging even 5 targets per game. I hear you, but I am confident we, again, start to see a bit more volume come his way as the Bills are hopefully at some point, forced to play some more competitive 60-minute football games. Another riser on the docket, Dwain, we do have, actually, no, we're going straight to fallers here. Garrett Wilson, yeah, man, going up against Patrick Surtain Jr. and the Broncos really is going to be a tough stretch for Garrett with some of the shadow cornerbacks he's going to be dealing with. Had Christian Gonzalez last Thursday night, and now he gets Pat Surtain, who has done a pretty great job this year, Dwain. We've had Chris Godwin go for 17 PPR points. Tyler Lockett had 13, but those guys weren't exactly getting the Surtain treatment. That went to DK Metcalf, who had, 29 scoreless yards. George Pickens, 29 scoreless yards. Now, had a lot more that sadly weren't in the box score. We always cover that in the Sheesh report, but also Mike Evans, 17 scoreless yards. So we liked what we saw out of the Jets offense last week, Dwain, but just not the easiest matchup here for one Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I will say that he is a different archetype than those players. I highlighted all those players in the rankers, risers and fallers today over on FantasyLife.com. You guys can go check it out. There's a chance Wilson still wins the matchup. Like, he has a 29% target share this season, despite the fact that defenses have been rolling extra coverage to him. We heard Aaron Rodgers talk about that last weekend, Ian. So 29% target share and 42% of the air yard share, despite getting help coverage. That's absolutely insane. Most wide receivers in the NFL can't do that if you give them single coverage every game all day long against the worst cornerback on the Commanders. That's how rare it is to do what Garrett Wilson is doing, but we do have to respect Patrick Surtain, what he's been able to do to those other players. So when I look at him right now, Ian, I've got him downgraded to that mid-range wide receiver 2 status, but I toyed with even pushing him a little bit further. I know this feels like a cruel joke, folks, because the two of the major upgrades this week in the utilization report were part of the buy lows were Garrett Wilson as well as J.K. Dobbins. And those things still absolutely stand. And if you can still trade for Garrett Wilson, I don't want to wait because, again, he is good enough to go out there and roast even a guy like Surtain, right? Or the Jets could be smart enough to move him around and protect him from having Surtain on him, keeping him in motion, getting him inside. Surtain will follow him some, but he may not all the time. So it only takes a few plays for a guy like Garrett Wilson. And you know that Aaron Rodgers is going to know when he doesn't have that help coverage. So, again, he does get the downgrade this week. But, again, I think he is still that buy low, and I'm still trying to get him, even if I'm not sure that I want him in my fantasy lineup for this weekend.
Nathaniel Hackett revenge game, Dwain. Maybe we get the game plan of his life against this Broncos defense that, again, has been playing well this year, but a fully healthy, ready to go version of the Jets offense should be able to still put some points up on the board. That brings us to our sicko start of the week at wide receiver. It is Falcons wide receiver 1B at this point, Darnell Mooney, Dwain, going up against the Saints defense that looked a bit more mortal, in week 3 against the Eagles. So talk about Mooney and how, the usage hasn't quite been as wide between him and Drake London as maybe we expected a few short weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, London is he's the wide receiver 1. Like, he's got the top target share and everything on the team. But Mooney, to your point, is not far behind, and he's really looking like the number 2 over Kyle Pitts in the offense. Kyle Pitts has a 15% target share, Ian. Darnell Mooney is sitting at 23%. So we've got 3 games. It's not the end of the world for Kyle Pitts, but, you've done the study. Close. I've done the study, and everything that goes into the utilization report. 4 weeks is a real key number, and we're almost there with this data. So Mooney right now, if I had to pick, I would say, yeah, I think he might be the number 2 option on this team over Kyle Pitts for the rest of the season. And the one last thing with Mooney, Ian, I know he had a lull there over the last couple of years, but we did have a couple of early seasons where he did show maybe he had a little bit more. Then he battled some injuries, some quarterback stuff. I know the film wasn't necessarily great. You broke down some of the things you saw. I can't remember. This may have been last season when you did that, but at least we have seen it at some point in Mooney's career, and now he's showing it again, and he's done it for 3 weeks. So I am inclined to think that while he might not stay at a 23% target share, he might be like a 20% guy. And as Kirk Cousins continues to get more healthy, as this offense continues to get better, I do think there's something to like with Mooney, especially this weekend. When you look at the Saints, Ian, they've given up 257 yards per game to opposing passing offenses, so they haven't quite been the juggernaut that we've seen in the past. Now, Marshawn Lattimore, he's been battling some injuries. He actually missed a game, so that's part of it. But I would expect Drake London to get more of the Lattimore treatment, right? If they're going to be matching these guys up. And that could even be another thing for Mooney. So he does upgrade to low-end wide receiver 3 status. And if you are in a sicko league, he is a guy that also offers wide receiver 2 upside. So I'm fine getting him in the lineups, Ian, if you need to.
I know the thing that surprised me diving into this a little bit more on my own research was, I knew that the targets were close, and they are 19 for London, 17 for Mooney this year. But just from watching, I thought Mooney's were a bit more designed at the line of scrimmage. Not really, Dwayne. I mean, air yards this year, it's 169 for Drake London, 166 for Darnell Mooney. Again, far closer to a 1A, 1B situation than I think we ever could have anticipated. Dwayne, I know you got tons of other goodness in your rankings column, which is live on FantasyLife.com, but go ahead and enlighten us real quick with a quick rapid fire round.
Yeah, so, I mean, looking at wide receiver, we do have a lot of other potential upgrades. You guys are just going to have to keep an eye this weekend on the injury report. So DJ Moore, if we don't have Keenan Allen back, look, the man's got a 26% target share. He's going up against the Rams defense that just got punked by Juwan Jennings. So he's going to upgrade to a borderline wide receiver 1 if Keenan Allen is out. Keenan did practice yesterday. Jaden Reed, we could have Jordan Love back. Jaden Reed is the most prolific playmaker on the Packers offense, period, besides maybe the quarterback. 23% target share, Ian, despite the fact that he's not getting all this full playing time, but he gets touches on the ground as well. If you get Jordan Love back and we get the ceiling back in this passing game, playing in a nice matchup here, I would definitely like to have Jaden Reed into my lineups. Eagles wide receivers, neither A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith practiced yesterday. Brown's is a hamstring, Devonta Smith's a concussion. If we had a situation where A.J. Brown did not play again, Devonta Smith in the last 2 games, Ian, has a 31% freaking target share without A.J. Brown. So that would mean he would be a borderline wide receiver 1 if he went and A.J. Brown was down. And then Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell has shown up with rib and wrist injuries. He did not practice yesterday. So if that were to happen, and if that were to be a situation where he didn't play this weekend, we get a condensed passing offense around just Nico Collins and really Stephon Diggs. That would make Diggs a borderline wide receiver 1 instead of right now we've got him in wide receiver 3 territory against a Jaguars defense that has the 9th worst PFF coverage grade at 62.2.
Final point, everyone. Our tight end riser of the week is going to go to another Jets pass catcher, this time, obviously, Tyler Conklin, going up against the Broncos, who have been okay against tight ends. But again, it's just the fact that Conklin has rarely left the field for this Jets offense this season. 90% route rate, that is tops in the NFL. And accordingly, he's my tight end 15 and Dwayne's tight end 14. Dwayne, I know I was going through waiver wires on our mini shared teams yesterday. And yeah, got a lot of Trey McBride squads out there where we need to find a replacement. And Tyler Conklin, as good as any that you could ask for on the waiver wire right now.
Yeah, and last weekend we saw Cade Otton get a 24% target share against this team because why? Mike Evans was taken away. You already talked about what they've done. They've put the clamps on the outside wide receiver 1. If that happens to Garrett Wilson this weekend, those targets have to go somewhere. It's probably not going to be Mike Williams, who could also have a tougher matchup on the outside. So I think it's probably some of these guys working the middle areas of the field. Last week, remember, it was Godwin doing that from the slot, and then Cade Otton underneath the coverage. So you could have Conklin really doing a bit of both of those things, attacking the middle area of the field and operating underneath the coverage for a guy that's not coming off the field. I know on paper it looks bad because the Broncos are the best defense in the league as far as passing yards allowed per game. But Aaron Rodgers looked really crisp last weekend. So I think he's going to come out and do his thing, and Conklin's going to be one of his main targets this weekend.
Again, guys, you can find all of our ranks amongst our other cool rankers on FantasyLife.com. And Dwain had a great rankings column with his risers, fallers, and sicko starts. Again, free over at FantasyLife.com. So make sure you guys check that out. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. Cowboys Giants, first time they have not played on Sunday night since the 40s per sources. What a time to be alive. So Dwain and I will be back tomorrow going through some injury goodness. But otherwise, just have a great rest of your day. So for Dwain, for producer Kelsey, for producer Matt, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning to the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.